Everyone, namaskar, and the folks who have been really regular on every Saturday morning must be wondering that let's log on, and if you want to know the temperature in Bangalore, because I'm really my heart really beats for the nature. I just love this, and I think the only positive of the lockdown is the clean air and more greenery around. And I think that's really beautiful. And in Bangalore this morning, 20 degrees, bit of a cloudy sky, rain's expected towards the end of the day. Nice weather, and I'm really looking forward to going for a nice walk after the session. But something which really intrigued me has been, when people ask me, or we generally ask that, how's the weather just before the cricket match? And I'm calling cricket because Sauvik's there and Prashant, Rishi, they all are fan of cricket. So, and we have a lot of data around this. But at the end of the day, it is the artificial intelligence that tries to bring the real core from that particular data and give us that answer. How is the weather today? I'm in a small boutique business, and for me and my team, it's a real challenge at times to profile our database, to really understand what they're doing, what they're not doing. And just imagine Facebook with 2 billion plus users out there, and they're all uploading text and photographs and videos, and with just in a real time. If somebody has to tag someone, it just happens. And how does that all happen? It happens because of the artificial intelligence. We keep putting the comments and keep liking the post, etc., etc. And then you have these marketing companies who comes out and gives us the actual content that we're looking for. And this is all the strength of the artificial intelligence, the driverless cars, which has been kicking off by almost every large company that you can think about. It is a lot of work in progress in that particular space. Artificial intelligence today saving a lot of lives on the road by installing them into the trucking business. The entire delivery new app is largely built around that particular thing. Rishi is in financial business. Today you want to take a loan, credit approvals. It happens largely on a real-time basis, and it's all practically the role of this particular technology. And I think this is endless, and we can keep going and going and going. And I'm a layman, and I probably understand nothing about technology. But AI has certainly fascinated me a lot, especially the personal assistants that we all get in today, whether it's a Hey Alexa or a Hey Google, who keeps answering a lot of our questions, and even going forward, even fixing up appointments and meetings and etc. I think it's a very, very interesting world around this. And today, we have 5 experts from this particular domain to talk about this particular subject, and I'm very sure that it's going to be extremely engaging and insightful conversation, looking at the passion of everybody. So none of them actually need any formal introductions, but I have a very strict guidelines from Hari, who's my editor, to do that. So allow me to put this across. So we have Anand, Jain, co-founder and chief strategy officer, CleverTap. Prashant, Jhaveri, co-founder, MediBuddy. Rishi, Gupta, managing director and CEO of Fino Payment Banks. And Souvik Banerjee, CTO, Tata Digital. And to moderate the conversation, we have Sudipta Ghosh, data and analytics leader, partner, PwC India. Lovely friends, and I'm more than happy to call all of them game changers. And so Prashant, Rishi, Anand, Sudipta, Souvik, welcome. My only request is that there are a lot of dabblers like me attending today's session, so please use a non-technology language so that we can all understand this a little better off. And I'm going to come back towards the end of conversation to also understand from you all that is there something else that is controlling your life beyond the artificial intelligence? And until then, Sudipta, the screen is all yours, and welcome, and look forward to a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak, and absolutely a pleasure to be part of this session with a very, very learned audience in the subject of artificial intelligence. And I must say that it gives us a bit of relaxed setting on a Saturday morning that we can talk about it. And we would like to keep it fairly conversational in nature. So believe me, we have not done any rehearsal. So we are just performing on stage together for the first time. So it will be absolutely spontaneous. I can promise you that. Now, when we talk about the subject of AI as a game changer, what do we exactly mean by that? And whilst we have seen a lot of announcements which have come, even many announcements from the government as well, that in these times, AI probably would be a big differentiator. We would like to explore that topic in some more detail and try to separate the hype from the reality, the promise from what is actually happening, on the ground. Now, so to kick it off, let me share some perspectives, and then I will probably break some themes which we can discuss as a group. So there are two things, in my opinion, which has happened because of this unprecedented crisis in which we are all in. The first one is that there is a lot of focus now on contactless, touchless activities, whether it's selling, whether it is receiving, whether it is doing internal processes. We are in a state where it is not likely that people would be physically sitting together with each other for doing most of their day-to-day job, right? Now, what that means? That means that a lot of transactions which used to happen will clearly need to happen through a digital map channel, because that's the only way you can do without any contact. Now, what does that mean? If you have more and more transactions, more and more activities which are going to be done digitally, the first implication of that, beyond anything else, is the fact that you are going to collect more and more digital information for sure. And that has got implications in terms of how do you manage that data, and how do you use it to your advantage. So that is first. The second piece is around the fact that there is going to be pressure on improving the productivity. There is going to be pressure in terms of doing more for less, because if you are running a factory or an enterprise, you may not be able to get everybody come in there. If you have got, if you are in services organization, you will have a lot of people who will be working from home, but they still need to work. So there will be situation where you need the help of a technology to do more for less, right? And how does AI play into the role, right? Play to this. The third aspect which I also want to talk about is there will be certain sectors which might change forever. For example, if I just look at the healthcare, you will find that for a routine checkup, it's unlikely that somebody would like to go to the hospital, because they might be afraid of getting something else if they just go there. So then, rather than a person going to the hospital, how do you bring the hospital back to the person, right? Not just that, if I have to get a diagnostic done, then how do I do it by sitting from my home? Okay. So there will be sectors, and healthcare is just one of the examples, which will get fundamentally changed because of the current situation. And we all see that AI will have a role to play to enable or even hasten that process, right? So let me open up the conversation with the first theme, as I would to more around what is it that we are seeing in terms of the benefits, the use cases, the real applications of AI in some of the sector, and invite Rishi to talk about what is your experience in terms of doing business digitally, contactless, and how AI use cases or AI applications are helping to enable that entire end-to-end delivery of services in the financial services. So Rishi, would you like to share some thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Sudipta. I think you are trying to cover two things. One is in terms of digitization in this COVID scenario, and secondly, in terms of the AI, the use of AI in financial services as such. So I'll address the first on the digitization first. See, on digitization, what we are seeing is that as Fino, let me just give you a background. We are a phygital company, a phygital bank. We have access to about 250,000 merchants or points all across the country. And we do about nearly about 2.5 crore transactions physically per month. So for us to be physically present is very important because our customer audience is people who are in lower to middle income categories, and they are largely non-digital, non-smartphone kind of a world. So in this scenario, what we were looking at in terms of as the physical challenges are coming, how do we do the entire thing on virtualization? And we are moving big time on moving everything on digitization. See, when demon happened, we see a lot of digitization happening at the customer end. The customer started to use wallets and other digital tools to do the business. During this pandemic, we expect a lot of digitization happening on the B2B side, a lot of digitization happening on how to engage and do RPAs internally. So virtualization is becoming the norm. Just to give you an example, the other day we were discussing a challenge in terms of doing physical verification in some of our branches where we could not travel. And so we said, why don't we do virtualization of physical verification? So we are thinking of even going to steps like doing person used to go to a branch to do physical verification. How do we make it to a video program in which you can do physical verification of cash to a video program? So things like that, I think everything is open. Uh, Video KYC is something which has recently been launched. We are also in the process of launching it. That will change the entire KYC platform for the banks in times to come. So during COVID, during pandemic, I think digitization is taking center stage in every decisioning, every meetings in the company. And we are keeping a very, very open mind that if there is any problem, completely you have to move from face to face to non-face to face. So why do people need to travel? Why do we need to even go for meetings? And we have been able to do sales, which used to be physically, we have to be present. So we have been able to consume sales. We are able to do some tie-ups with some companies, some banks. Even government meetings are now happening on virtual platforms. So a lot of things have moved. The entire mindset has changed completely because of COVID, and I think this is going to be the new normal in terms of virtualization in a big way, digitization in a big way. You came on email, I think entry of fintechs, the digital hands of some of which is paramount. Banks have started to invest big time and big money in AI ML technologies. Just to give you some examples in terms of what we guys are doing or banks are normally doing in on using AI ML is largely around 3-4 factors. One is in terms of enhancing the customer experience, whether through chatbots or through transactions through chatbots, product recommendations, engaging with the tech-savvy millennials. In fact, the customer behavior is changing towards that, and banks are adopting quite well on the AI ML platforms. The second is more internal is how do we improve employee productivity? How can we make routine tasks more automated? Something like central operations getting more and more automated as such. I think the biggest use case till now, which banks have been successful, especially on the AI/ML, is minimizing the risk and fraud detection. We have seen examples of credit cards getting blocked, transactions getting you getting called from a bank saying you have done a transaction right now. Is it your transaction? So a lot of fraud management and fraud risk things have happened through AI/ML. I think one good thing which is happening and around the regulatory and compliance, also adopting AI/ML, especially on the KYC AML piece. So that is another area where we are seeing a lot of adoption on AI/ML on KYC and AML piece. One thing which we in Fino are doing quite successful with one of our partners is lead conversion. So we have like we have about 250,000 merchants. Whenever we get a lead from the system, we are able to identify that this lead on a social media, whether it's a lead or a complaint, and accordingly we move it to the respective buckets. So if it's a lead conversion, we also try to use that lead conversion to which merchant we should focus that lead into. So, and that is based on the productivity of that particular merchant in the past month or so. So a lot of those specific examples have been built up. But I think on financial services, also because of the pandemic, there is going to be a big thrust on the digitization and usage of AI/ML. I think AI/ML is, or digitization is not a talk and left as the technology or with the digital officers. It has become a boardroom discussion right now. So that's where I would like to probably share my opening remarks. I think Sudipto is, yes.
Great. No, I think those are very, very relevant examples, Rishi, which you gave. And I think, the points around improving the customer experience, also improving the internal productivity and remaining compliant with the regulators are some of the great, use cases, which I think, as you rightly pointed out, the current situation will only add to it, because there is now a need for getting things done, as you said, in a more virtual world as opposed to physically going and meeting your customer. Now, in that theme of trying to enhance the customer experience and trying to reach closer to the customers without physically going to them, I would like to kind of invite Shovik now, because Shovik, you have got a huge amount of experience both in the B2B and the B2C space, and in terms of the wide diversity of products and services which you take to your customers. You've already been a pioneer in terms of taking it digitally. And if you would like to kind of share your thoughts and probably expand a theme on this theme of virtualization in terms of getting closer to customers, and any other point, that will probably give more substance to this current theme of how AI is helping organizations in today's times. So over to you, Shovik.
Thank you, Sridhar. Good morning. So let me just break down. It's a very different way to start this. See, my observation, my background is all 20 years of NLP and device learning. I have seen AI grow in the last 21 years in very many different ways. Earlier, we have faced this when the recession hit, when we were all, and how AI evolved then. Prior to that, in the early 80s and 90s, when neural networks was limited to only physical robotics, and specifically in the auto industry, they have pivoted when required by other industries. Again, we are hit today after 10, 12 years after the recession, where there's a global impact. There are two things which I'm observing. One is, let's just break a basic observation of what AI is. Artificial intelligence has been there for 60 plus years. We were always using artificial intelligence in a device learning capability, in a decision tree. So I ask a simple question. I want the result, and I am able to do it through the methodology of decision tree and results, which is a semantic network. Over a period of time, when neural network kicked in, a neural network is nothing but the ability to predict, project, and recommend capabilities. So there are two. AI still exists in two forms. Can I do personalization to a customer without learning the data set, learning capabilities in predictive models, learning abilities in projective models? Answer is yes. How many people are doing it? Probably 50% of the world is doing it. What is the other 50% of the world doing in a consumer space to reach the customer? So what has done a global pandemic when we are all closed grouped and access to customers not physically present? the mining and the modeling of a customer attribution has increased. Example, if I am a customer of Chroma, I have got about 30 attributes of mine. I've got my base core attributes, my name, address, my details, my age, XYZ. I add my profile with Titan. 30 more attributes happen. I add my profile of Tata Sky and I add my profile of Tata AIG and Tata AIA. My attribute happen. So a customer, so example, Shovik, who was known to have only 20 attributes and characteristics, suddenly I have 380. So I have a giga profile. What happens when you have a giga profile? What happens when you have a giga profile is my affinity data models, my payment data models, my behavioral data models, my online intent models, my browse capability online or on my device is very different to what my browse capability of a 10-year-old son of mine or my parents. Very different. You add affinity models to that. When I say affinity model, my wallet share. How much is my spend pattern? Do I spend in the pin codes around 40053 or do I also spend my money around pin codes of 40001? Those start to come in. Now you have these rich 380 attributes. Your affinity models are starting to come in. Example, my category affinity. Do I like headphones? And do I like a soya chai tea latte from Starbucks? Or do I only watch HBO and Tata's or only European Premier League? These are affinity models. When you have a customer attribution, an affinity model, when you marry them, you have a n equal to 1 personalization. At that time, it's not a cold start personalized experience and talking to a customer anymore. It's a n equal to 1. That means out of millions of customers, I am able to connect to Anand or Sudipto or Naveen or Shovik, everyone one-to-one, or Deepak one-to-one level, n equal to 1. N equal to 1 personalization, if I keep it in layman's terms, if I know only 20 things about a human being and I know 380 things about a human being, is very different. That is what has pivoted in the global pandemic. And I think biggest of the tech companies, biggest of the conglomerates are getting, because the human being is not there anymore in the store or in the lounges or in the airports, but I know the ability of that human being. So that is where I think we are pivoting, and I think it's a healthy thing. That is the biggest impact what I'm seeing in a consumer facing parlance where AI is pivoting. Personalization always was there. But attribution of that personalization, people have just made an effort to pivot to that space.
No, wonderful. Very well articulated, Shovik, I must say. And it's very, very interesting because we are truly talking about a segment of one. Proceeding on that theme, can I invite Anand? You are a digital first and a mobile first organization. And of course, this segment of one will be very, very important. In addition to other things which we spoke about from a experience perspective and a productivity perspective. So would be great to hear your thoughts on the same in terms of how do you see AI as a game changer for your business and for the business of your customers?
Thank you, Shripta. So we are a user retention and engagement platform, and we play in the marketing automation space, broadly put. And that means we get to work with a very wide variety of customers, whether they are banks or digital, first organizations like on-demand ride-hailing apps or food delivery, or even retail stores. A very, very wide variety of customers. So we have a very good vantage point in looking at a broad range of patterns that are emerging. And which industries are leading the charter and which industries are kind of lagging and not kind of they want to go ahead, but then they're trying with products like ours. I wanted to actually build up a couple of points that Shovik mentioned. that that AI or data science has been around for forever. What is I think last 10 years, computing power has become very cheap. It's become you can just launch or spawn a new instance of a server, like through a click instead of purchasing one. That's one. And two, the data storage has become also very cheap. Now, if you combine something that's cheap, it becomes very much available. So with the a lot of businesses now want to collect data. They want to make sure that they have data. They want to use it to some businesses don't know what they want to use it for, right? They have FOMO and they just want to collect everything, and they'll say, hey, later on we'll figure out, I see a friendly nod from Shavik here, but later on we'll figure out what to do with it. And there are some businesses who've got a plan in action, right? They have a problem statement they want to solve. Our customers typically come to us with the problem statement of, hey, can we personalize the user experience? Can we personalize every touch point of the user journey, right? Right from when we acquire a particular user all the way to making sure that this person becomes a champion, an advocate, repeat customer, loyal customer, and so on and so forth, right? They go on and refer other people to us. And how can we use a platform like CleverTap, to pull that off? So I think, earlier, most of marketing used to be rule-based, right? I mean, I remember getting emails at midnight. Why? Because, some server ran some sort of a job at midnight, collated all the products, that would go on a sale and send that email to me.
I think you should talk about how a very large, one of the largest OTT platforms uses your AI component. And watching a live cricket match of India and Pakistan, if you go out to grab a cup of coffee, you are able to learn the customer intent that he's not watching, and you're able to personalize and send a message. I think that's one of the best innovations I've seen in recent times from any large organization or small. So you must talk about that to this very enriched, insightful panel.
Absolutely. Like I can actually switch over to that example. So let's say you're watching you're watching a match on IPL. This match has, and a lot of people tune in, when there's a live match, they want to watch what's going on. But after a while, people, they might, you might have other things, and they might tune out of the match, right? Because it's not an interesting match anymore, or they've lost interest. There are other things that are demanding their attention. And let's say there's a turning point within the match, and the ability for, to use a platform like ours, and very quickly figure out who are the people that have watched at least 40 minutes of the current match. So they had some sort of an interest, but are not watching the match right now. Can we send them a personalized notification? And notification is more immediate. It lands up on your phone. It's there on the lock screen. You press the notification and you can get back into the match, right? You can resume watching the match. So can I, if there is a turning point, let's say Virat Kohli is about to score a century, and at that moment, literally a couple of runs away from his century, you send a notification to the user saying that, hey, will Virat Kohli be able to score his century? Now it's an interesting point in the match. These notifications have to, one, be super personalized. So it cannot go to the audience that was not watching IPL, because they don't care probably. They are there for Game of Thrones or some other, something else, right? So it has to be for the live audience. It has to be for people who have spent significant amount of time watching the particular event, and it has to be timely. And that's the hardest part, right? Can you kind of personalize in time, in the mobile moment? We have a term we call this the mobile moment, right? That means that if you send that tweet, if you send that notification a few minutes later after he has scored a century, people will be pissed off. They will not say, hey, this is, they're like, hey, it's already done, man. What are you telling me? If you send it, at the right time, it actually serves, it's not spam, it actually says, hey, you know what, thank you for letting me know. I'll click on this thing and my match will resume on my phone. I'll start watching the match again. So it brings you back into the app at the right moment. And if you translate this use case to, other apps, for example, if you're at the airport, waiting for a cab, and you just landed in Bangalore, from some place, and you turn on the app and it says, hey, there's a surge pricing, or there's a 20-minute wait for the app, for the cab. At that point of time, if the brand knows that, hey, this is Sudipta and he is, he's a platinum customer, he uses us all the time, and we cannot show him either surge pricing or we cannot show him a wait, right? So you get a call from the contact center saying that, hey, Sudipta, we'll make a cab available to you in the next 5 minutes. Why don't you stay where you are? And that intervention, that timely intervention makes all the difference between a James Bond experience, as we call it, a very wow experience where you don't have to call the brand, you don't have to, try a competitive app. It's just in time. It's the right level of personalization. It's not creepy. And you feel like, a very empowered user. You feel like, hey, this brand takes care of me, right? Just because I've been using them all the time. Now, this used to happen in physical stores, right? If you go to your favorite restaurant, probably the server recognizes you. They'll give you one of the best seats at the restaurant, right? If you go to a salon, they know what kind of haircut you want. They know kind of what your hairstyle preferences are. If you go to a bank, probably people know you there, right? Because they've seen you before. And, just a friendly wave or a, hey, how's it going? Like, helps. How do you do it digitally? And that's the hard part, right? So with the, earlier two themes of, computing become cheaper, a lot of data being available, can you process all that in real time to make sense and to reach out to people, to anticipate what they need, to figure out, what they might, whether this is a good day for them to be in your app or not, right? Whether they would, call your contact center for a return because you saw that, a couple of days ago, you shipped them a product and the entire series of that product was faulty, right? Can you predict these things in the moment, in the right time, at the right time, right? And can you preempt an action? Can you proactively reach out to the user saying that, hey, we shipped you a faulty product, like, so instead of you calling some 1-800 number and, spending hours with the IVR, like, hey, we proactively reached out, we'll send you a replacement right away. So these are some of the things that are now possible, and a platform like ours makes it possible for a lot of our clients.
No, great. I think that's fantastic, Prashant. And let me kind of give a perspective to this, that our intention is always very noble. What we are trying to do is to simulate that personalized experience which used to exist in the past in a more traditional way to a digital medium. And what Shovik said is that if you have got, say, only 30 attributes and you are creating a mega profile of 200 or 300 attributes, it's only helping me to customize my offering to the specific needs of the customer. So the intentions are very noble. But I would just like to call out a word, Prashant, Anand, which you said, which is around, it should not feel creepy, right? And I just want to deliberate a little bit on that topic. And also, I think there is a question from the audience that when you do find a segment of one, when you are so much knowledgeable about the individual customer, their likes, preferences, behaviors, etc., how do you assure that the customer does not feel threatened by all that volume of information which you have captured, either knowingly or unknowingly, because they have signed up to some terms and conditions in the app which they have never read, or they are doing something which is getting recorded anyways. So where is that comfort which we can give, or if at all we can give any comfort, because somebody can say, no, they just signed it up, so I'm completely legal because they have agreed to share their data with me, right? So any perspectives and thought on that to assure or reassure the customer or the consumer that the organization is working in their best interests? So any thoughts? I would kind of open it up for both Shovik and Anand to expand a little bit more on this aspect.
So I think Anand, I'll have a quick 1-minute answer to this. Is there is A and I, and then there is device learning. I mean, we have moved away from machine because devices learn, different devices, different operating systems learn, and let's call out the elephant in the room. Hence, there has been a Cambridge Analytica. Hence, there has been a Google Senate inquiry, and those questions asked to Sundar were exactly on those lines. The last mile in unstructured country like India, where unstructured data is flowing everywhere, the crux to this is the last mile which India has to solve, and globally it is getting solved. luckily I've been inducted as part of that is in a similar forum, is the ethical usage of AI. What is the ethical usage of AI on data? Am I allowed to snoop using a listener on a Android app? Am I allowed to snoop how much? Am I allowed to snoop how much on my iOS operating system? Because nobody reads the footprint and they just agree and download the app. You know, in the gaming industry, because remote virtual gaming is happening, whether you call it Minecraft or Roblox, or whether you're working on PUBG, this has been inducted, and they have triggered this thought, because there a massive selection of users in an hour are playing the same game to achieve against each other. They had to norm. I'll give you an example. In Roblox or Minecraft, if you do any abuse to a virtual user, it catches it and it bans your account. Can a consumer-facing e-commerce app or an experience app or a banking app allows you to do that? The answer is no today. Or in the gaming industry, in the digital gaming industry of apps, they have to, because, you know, if I'm racing or if I'm sprinting, I can't abuse my co-sprinter and touch the finish line. In the gaming industry, it has become a norm. In the consumer-facing app industry, it will only become a norm in India when formally the PDPB goes live. And so you have been a pioneer in your organization, and yourselves are working. That plus the ethical usage in a policy mode has to be an explicit consent for what I can know about a customer and personalize, and what I should not know. Because if you get access to your OS, you literally have access to his entire behavior and his browsing and his thumb history. I call it thumb history and the thumb architecture of the world right now. If my thumb behavior is exposed to anybody with all the noble intent, not everybody is noble. So we have to put in workflows to govern and constrain that. So the ethical usage and policy has to be given a explicit way to capture and alert the end customer. Billions of people in this country who have got 1 billion smart devices have to be told, have to be governed, and explicitly that consent has to be taken. That is ethical usage of getting a consent of my personalization of my AI modules, which will be the future of consumer experience in the nobility form which you are phrasing. I'll pause at that. Want to hear the others as well.
No, absolutely. I think this is a very, very important topic on the ethical usage of AI, and I was trying to come to that. So thanks for kind of broaching that subject, because I think whilst we are talking about the advantages, we should also talk about that. So Prashant, I would kind of turn to you, because you are in a very, very critical sector today. It's the healthcare. It is the most disrupted sector. It is also the sector which we believe will get significant benefit because of AI, simply because the doctor or the nurses and ratio against the population is way, way behind some of the developed countries. So it's virtually impossible for us to produce so many physicians or produce so many hospitals or nurses and all that, even without COVID, right? COVID has probably only complicated the problem further, right? And AI is actually looked upon as a breakthrough technology to significantly take the healthcare to the masses in a very cost-effective and also in a very, very efficient manner. So I would like to hear from you two parts. One is what is it that you are sensing and seeing now, and also if you can also touch upon the fact that some of the most personal and most sensitive data is in the healthcare sector. You are sharing all your details right from the date of birth. Date of birth is just the starting point. You just share everything about you, right? So if you can touch upon from the perspective of what are the benefits, use cases you're experiencing from your space, and secondly, how are we dealing with this concern about the data privacy?
Thank you very much, Sudipta. I think you're right. As far as AI is concerned, one of the sectors where AI can actually make a quantum impact clearly is healthcare. Let me step back and give you, a framework in which we've been thinking about AI and ML in healthcare. There are two broad buckets, right? Bucket number one is around automation. And bucket number two is around prediction. When you think of automation, this is more like the faster, better, cheaper mindset, right? Let me give you an example. And automation often is actually misunderstood for prediction, which it is not. An example would be saying, you have a chest x-ray. On the chest x-ray, there are these white dots. After looking at those white dots, AI says, hey, he's got pneumonia. That's not prediction. That's only classification. And in this faster, better, cheaper mindset, we've actually gone down the path of making sure that we go down wherever there is availability of data. So there is an availability bias. You're looking at solving those easy problems. Some of these problems don't even need solving. When you look at availability data, you look at bed monitors in the ICU, enough data. I gave you the example of X-rays, for example. So when you think of this, that essentially is the automation bucket. But the quantum impact is really going to be when you think of this in the predictive world, in the proactive world. We spoke, all of the esteemed panel members, just look at the swaths of data we've spoken about. Economic data, social data, data from behavioral patterns, social feeds, whatnot. But what about the underlying biological data? What about the epidemiological data? What about the data about that individual? We live in a world today where randomized controlled trials has 0 Indians and evidence from those randomized controlled trials are even applied on us. How is that even relevant? So when you think of prediction, let me give you a couple of use cases. And at the end of the day, AI is only as good as the action it enables. So when you think of the predictive world, wouldn't it, and there's work that actually is being done. So I'm actually not talking about, sci-fi and way into the future. Can you actually identify high-risk patients from the next 12 months? And then the most the highest impactable members or patients, you can actually start doing something proactively today. One great end use case. The second essentially would be saying, I know for a fact that there are some degenerative diseases. Say, for example, there is a knee replacement, hip replacement that actually needs to get done in 6 months, 12 months, 15 months from now. Can you actually now work today in identifying the high value providers? Not just about the fancy names, but someone who can actually deliver on the outcome, on the knees and the hips that need to get replaced. So these are the two broad buckets, one being automation, the other being prediction. I think all of this clearly works on the underlying data. And I think the algorithm always is as good as the data. And when you think of data in healthcare, you got to think about it in 3 different templates. But let's once again break it out into the quality of data and the quantity of data. The quantity of data, as long as you have, 2 important elements there. One, in terms of how many patients do you have this data about, number 1. But number 2, it's important saying what is the timeline across which you have this data from these patients. If we have to predict, saying in the next 3 years, which patients will essentially have gastrointestinal bleeds, we can't really do any of this analysis if we don't have at least 3 years of historical data. So if you were to ask me, saying, Prashant, would you prefer 200 million, patient data sets, or would you want 20 million over 5 years? I'll take the latter any day. Because in any case, you will take a 10% subset and do the analysis. Not only that, look at the amount of variables that actually go in. What medicines do I take? What are my diagnostic results? Have I undergone a procedure? Which doctors do I go to? Do I have some genome typing done? Right? When you put all of these epidemiological data, the medical data about the individual, and throw in economic, social feeds, that now actually gives you visibility about not only the individual, but the underlying biology of the individual. And data, to be candid, has been, in healthcare, unfortunately, has been a laggard in the adoption of technology. We think of technology saying, badhiya CT, MRI machine hai, vagera, vagera, a lot of technology inside the hospital. But the work that we've been focused on, and I can tell you, it's been about 15 years in healthcare and health insurance for me. And a big challenge has been to migrate the exchange of data and information between hospitals on the one hand and insurance companies on the other, which has always been on faxes, moved to electronic faxes and emails, actually an online platform. And even today, less than 1 in 3 actually happens on the platform, and 1 in 3 probably is an aggressive estimate. So when you think of data sets, not only about hospitalization, but I spoke to you about diagnostics, consults, meds, there's a lot of work that actually needs to get done from the point of view of the data itself. So I spoke to you about the quantity of data. Now let's talk about the quality of data. When you think about the quality of data, and it's interesting for us to actually recognize that needs to be twofold. One is, unfortunately, how much rigor is actually undertaken when you're capturing the data at the point of the incident happening. Most of us store data that's relevant for us. We don't really think saying how it could be relevant for the larger ecosystem that I'm actually a part of. Insurance company will say whatever is relevant for me is from the point of view of processing the claim. The hospital says from the point of view of clinical. So we end up so the rigor that is actually required to be able to capture as many essential items, because data importantly has to be thought of as saying, I may not have the use of it today, but I'm actually sowing the seed for the future. And when you think of individuals, our needs biologically are very different when we're in the 20s versus when in the 30s. So for example, if I'm in the 30s, I'm getting married, I got kids, I got vaccinations for the kids, I've got a C-section or a normal delivery. When I'm in the 40s, now I'm beginning to get afflicted with chronic condition diseases, diabetes, hypertension, whatnot. I'm in the 50s, now I'm actually thinking, say, hey, maybe it's time to get a cataract done, an eye replaced, a knee replaced, a hip replaced. I'm just saying, God forbid, saying, I hope I don't have to fix my heart as well. So you think of the biological journey of the individual across a period of time is humongous, which means the quality of data is about the rigor in terms of capturing all of these data sets, one. And second is consistently doing it over a period of time. So when we talk about AI and ML, that's an algorithm, but you actually need quality data for the algorithm to perform to its fullest. And which I think is important. And to your point, I think you and I, in the world around us, like I said, there are terms and conditions that you and I sign up for, and we don't even know. But the fact of the matter is, we actually willingly selling some of our data in terms of behavioral patterns, social feeds, whatnot, because we want a service in exchange for it, a free service, a free access. Healthcare and medicine, on the other hand, I think it is important because, one, from the point of view of consent, what stops us from actually saying it is not only about consent at the time of, seeking data from you, but even consent from you at the point in time that we share your data, right? And let me give you, when we think of data, a very simplistic example, and actually ties itself with the end use case as well, which is a relevance. Relevant for insurers, not relevant for someone else. And I'll give you a brass tacks example. The example is white hair and heart attacks, right? Now, in the advancement of medicine, it's irrelevant. But when you think of insurance and there are like 1,000 people waiting in queue outside, I have to figure out how many of them are actually white hair, because that is directly proportional to the number of cardiac ailments that I may potentially see in the future. I've got to price that into my insurance. So what are we speaking about? Saying is it broadly thought in the format of automation and prediction? Yes. Do you actually have to recognize that data is at the center of it, and you got to look at longitudinal data across a quantitative size of data, but also rigor and consistency in how it's getting captured? The answer is yes. And last but not the least, when you think of, at the end of the day, while we give free data away for behavior, as far as behavior and social feeds is concerned, I believe that the individual, when you can share your biological data in exchange, with your consent, of course, in exchange for you to be able to, for AI and ML and for organizations to help identify and stratify your risk early enough for you and the family, you'd be more than happily and willingly sharing this, saying, hey, listen, I want to be part of this, or even be part of randomized control trials so that it actually helps and benefits the Indian community at large. So I'm going to pause there, Sudipta, and feel free to call out if there is a question that is not answered.
No, absolutely. So I think, Prashant, that's very well articulated in terms of the entire depth and breadth. And I particularly like the fact when you talk more about the wellness aspect of it, which has the predictive component that I am going to see what is going to happen in future, and hence I will take some proactive actions to prevent it from happening, which essentially means that I'm moving away from curative to a wellness paradigm. And that's where the predictive technology will become more and more relevant and important, in addition to the automation, which is also very important. So I think that's very relevant. I'm going to actually pick up a theme which you mentioned very interestingly, was that healthcare has been a laggard, right? I'm just kind of paraphrasing you there. And also we have got somebody from financial services, someone from retail, right? So I would just like to get a perspective that given all this promise, and we have been discussing about really the promise of AI in multiple sectors, etc., right? And I don't think anybody has any doubts that AI is really going to be a game changer. And yet we see that there are challenges on adoption. Yet we see that people do not use it in their organizations. And yet we see that there is a lot of manual activity still very, very prevalent, right? So I'm just going to open it up in terms of what you feel from your experience are some of the challenges which is preventing organizations and sectors from using AI at a much wider scale than what it is being used for now. Or maybe it is more sector specific. Some sectors are way above the other. And if so, what are those learnings from the sectors who are truly the readers, from the sectors who can be considered as laggards and can learn from them, right? So, so maybe I can start from financial services to start with, which is probably
I just want to interject, Rishi, before you.
Yes.
I have a hard stop, as I mentioned earlier. I will take your permission to leave, but it's been extremely insightful, and thank you so much for having me. Prashant, Rishi, thank you so much. Good to get introduced. Hopefully we will get in touch soon. Anand, lovely to see you. I will take your leave. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you. We'll catch up later. So continuing on that theme, let us hear some perspective from financial services. Then we can move to healthcare and we can move to gaming and all that. So let's hear those perspectives. And the theme is, what can we do as professionals? What can we do as industry practitioners to first of all acknowledge if there is any problem in adoption of AI, and if so, what could be done to nudge that to the next level of sophistication? So maybe I will start with FS first.
Thank you, Sudhir. I think for us to understand FS, we'll need to break it up into different financial services is very, very broad. So there are banks, there are NBFCs, there are insurance companies, and there are mutual funds. Then there are fintech players which are there. So of all the players, I would say banks have been amongst, and me being a banker myself for more than 20 years, we are one of the most lazy guys, and because of the credit, and we have seen customers coming in to us and be engaging with customer in a more of a physical network in the past 20 years or so. But some of the other companies, especially the sectors around insurance, and we heard Prashant talking about how insurance is using some of the AIs to actually work on building up the entire claim processing, or whether how much insurance premium should be there. The entire actual calculations are based on a lot of lot of intelligence, so to say, and I'm sure they are building up more and more data which has been done around insurance. Mutual funds and some of the other companies have been using it quite extensively. We have seen some of the digital lending companies who have come up, who are using data, not only data from the financial data which they get from the customer, but also data which is available in the ecosystem through credit rating agencies or rating agencies, or people have started to use a lot of social data which is available on various Facebook and other social mediums per se. So a lot of that data has also started to be used in many digital fintech companies. But coming to banks, because I refer more on banks, so we have seen with the advent of financial technologies companies, the fintech companies, banks have also progressively started using more AI extensively, especially on the retail side. So we divide the bank more on the wholesale as well as we divide it on the retail side. So on the retail side, we have seen the usage of extensively on, especially on credit cards, the debit card usage or expense patterns which have been come up. So if you look at any bank app, you will see the bank app covers almost everything within the financial services domain. So you can buy mutual funds, you can buy insurance, you can actually track your expenses, you can track your credit card spends, you can track by categories, it also signals whether you are exceeding your budget. So budgetary controls have been also put in by some of the banks, some of the fintech companies. So a lot of AI is getting driven, as I mentioned in my earlier discussion, was it is driven around the fact of the consumer insight, and the banks are focusing more on the millennials, which are becoming part of the banking ecosystem, and they want to try out everything on mobile app. None of them want to actually visit a branch now. So the extension of the branch model is coming more on the digital side in a very big way. So a lot of AI tools banks are developing, especially on the consumer behavior. And banks, I would say, financial services were one of the early movers on AI because of the financial transactions, and with the advent of fintech, digital wallet, and other companies in the last 10 years, how we can use them in terms of location wise, which location is doing better, and it actually takes into account the government data which is also available in that location: number of ATMs, number of post office, number of people taking NREGA, number of people who are hospitals are there. So all of data, that data gets accumulated, and we are able to know that this is a GDP data which is there, that this geography seems to be better, and then we see our performance vis-a-vis that geography and try to look alike in other parts of the country where similar data is available, how we can build up our ecosystem. So a lot of those things. A chatbot is another big example which banks have been using. Whether you name any big bank, they started chatbot many years back, and a lot of reworking has happened on the chatbot ecosystem. Banks over the years have actually refined basis the communication they are doing with the people on the chatbot. So we are also tied up with the exponential apps on some of the chatbot discussions. In fact, our chatbot is called No Fee. So and that's what we are trying to focus on. So a lot of discussions around customer profiling, sales profiling, a lot of discussions around cost optimization. We discussed earlier also. So a lot of those things are coming together. I just mentioned earlier in terms of when a customer connects with us on a social media, how we are able to engage with them, how we are able to build intelligence around what we are hearing on social media. So customer would come to us with a complaint, or could be a lead or some suggestion. So our tie-up with Quick Metrics, which is our platform in which we are tying up, we are able to use that to automatically take that communication of social media into that separate buckets. So if it's a complaint, it goes into the complaint bucket. Automatically, somebody looks at it, and we are able to find a solution. Otherwise, everybody will have to look at the chatter on the social media, put it into different buckets. So that is where the banks have actually tied up with a lot of companies, a lot of startups, a lot of specialized companies who are able to build up those platforms which are there. So a lot of learnings has also emerged, especially in terms of engaging. I still remember in early days when the AI tools were developed, in terms of the banks used to, even knowing that I have a balance of a particular amount, they would just still send me a message that, do you want a loan which 10% of the balance which is there in the bank account. So now we don't see that kind of things coming up. All of us have been inundated with a lot of calls which comes up from the call centers, whether you want a credit card, whether you and that of time. The systems don't talk to each other. Data not be seriously normal systems, especially on financial services, because we have been there for so many hundred. So a lot of systems have been bought at points of time, lot of data sitting in different systems. If we can mix all data together under one customer, which some of the banks, which is the new age banks, have been, because we are able to build one customer, one view, especially in financial services. I think we can do much more with the AI capabilities which banks have built internally, and also partner with a lot of ecosystem players.
Sure, Rishi. No, I think that's very helpful to understand the perspectives. And since we might be having another 15-20 minutes of time, so I'll request the audience, they can fire in their questions, and I can see some of the questions which is being asked also. So I'll try and cover some of those questions in the overall theme. So before I move to the question, maybe I will like to hear the perspective from Anand in terms of some of the challenges, roadblocks, any concerns which prevents the adoption of AI and analytics in organizations.
One of the challenges we have seen is, a lot of enterprises, a lot of businesses collect a lot of data. Now, when they have to run or use AI, they need to stitch it all together. The quality of the data might not be optimal for them, right? The data, the granularity of the data or the fidelity of the data they've collected might not be enough to run a model on top of that. So the stitching together, the availability or the democratization of data within the enterprise, to make it available, etc. Like what Rishi said, right? Connecting the social media chatter with, who's talking to the bank and who's, interacting with the app, etc. Like, putting it all together helps. Again, we've seen this in different enterprises. A lot of the traditional businesses that came from, physical world into digital. I think there the challenge is a lot more than the businesses that were born in the cloud, right? So if you're a streaming app or if you're a food delivery app, like, you're literally born, you're born in the cloud, right? You're born in, in the last 7-8 years, while insurance maybe, or banking, retail, those are industries that lag. And the challenges, are because each department, each, function went ahead and using a technology that works best for them. And there is, there are very few technologies that stitch it all together for the broader picture. And without this, without, stitching it all together, without collating all the data sources, it's like looking at the world with, one of your eyes closed, or, a quarter of your eye closed, right? Like, it's literally, you're seeing half of the picture. And anything that, you try to predict, or whether you try to kind of anticipate, like, with something that's incomplete, will give you incomplete results. So, so I think that's one of the challenges. There are several other challenges, the push or the impetus, from the boardroom to, to the data scientists, or, the technology team to deliver results very quickly. Like, they're like, hey, can we do a POC in 3 months and see something very quickly? And sometimes you just cannot get results in 3 months, right? Sometimes you can get results in 3 weeks. So it depends on the kind of problem statement you're trying to solve, and your willingness to put resources, commit timelines to it. So that's what I would want to say.
Sure, Anand. And I think I'll expand that theme a little more and say that time and again, whenever we have done some research from PwC, we have realized that one of the consistent themes which has come is the availability of right kind of skills in the organization or in the entire ecosystem which is supporting the usage and adoption of AI. And that also makes it a fairly interesting one, because if we are saying that there is a lack of skills, that by definition means that there are opportunities for people to acquire those skills and get gainfully employed, right? Whilst on the other hand, we are talking about automation of routine tasks, which are actually then means that you do not need a lot of people to do the manually done mundane type of work. So there is an element where the profile of the work would change in the future, where the shift will be away from a routine type of work to more data analysis and creative and decision making stuff, which would be the need of the hour, right? So we can see that there will be a shift in terms of the requirements from a job market, from a salary, from a employee perspective. So I just wanted to kind of understand this from a little more, and anyone maybe you can see it from a healthcare perspective, because that is one sector which is largely physical today. A lot of people getting employed, and it's also a manual intensive sector per se. So so what is your take, Prashant, from a healthcare perspective, in terms of the impact of AI in the entire job creation space?
Well, thanks, Gupta. I think in interesting times we live in, I think there are business models that are undergoing transformation as we speak, and transformation is the need of the hour. And AI essentially is going to be that key ingredient that is going to enable this transformation. So AI has got massive tailwind. Now, unfortunately, the challenge has been, and let me give you, we've all heard about telemedicine, right? How quickly the guidelines came in from the government as well. And I can tell you, before COVID, we used to talk about, with our enterprise customers, insurers, corporates, other payers, saying, hey, we're happy to bundle telemedicine inside your health insurance policy. And they used to be like, very exciting. Let's talk about it 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now. And in this matter of days, it actually went from saying, I want it tomorrow, I want it today, I want it yesterday. So in some sense, the business model transformation is actually thrust upon us. And AI, I believe, is going to play center stage role in making that happen. But before that, it's very important because healthcare specifically is very fast evolving, right? There are templates that are moving from fee for service to value-based care that are essentially outcome driven. And that is exactly why it's important to actually, for organizations, to have a data strategy in place. Now, the whole data strategy journey is actually twofold. One is about the incentives. Why would I share data? Why would I collect data? Why would I actually store data on the one hand? And the second is, to your point, saying just the technical ability of organizations and people that actually are part of this organization to be able to ingest this data, to be able to update this data as we have inferences coming out of it, and then essentially continuing to, to be able to use this for predictive modeling, predictive medicine in the space of healthcare. Unfortunately, AI, it is about, in the biomedical informatics world, it is about getting the best of clinical talent on the one hand, and get that talent to work with all of those guys who can convert these reams of data into rows and columns. Right? At the end of the day, those are very distinctly different sets of expertise, and we have folks that are actually, and we need to invest, and which is where the data strategy of organizations comes in place. If organizations are going to keep thinking about everything from the mindset of better, faster, cheaper, you and I will never be able to make, a quantum leap with the help of AI in the whole predictive, preventive, proactive world. So the investment is going to be around being able to take some of these guys who have the technical ability to ingest data, update data, and continue to work with massive swaths of data on the one hand, and essentially bring them together with a clinical ability, a biomedical ability to be able to stitch this together. Because at the end of the day, like I said initially on the call, AI is only as good as the action it enables. And, and specifically in healthcare, to your earlier point, Sudipta, that you made, that there is so much from the point of view of just paucity of infrastructure. Let me give you an example. This is, while in India we have, there's always been the ratio of beds to people and a paucity of it. There was an experiment that Google ran in the US. And this was an experiment on diabetic retinopathy. With high sugar, high diabetes, you have problems with the retina in the eyes. So they actually wanted to bring down screening time. So the screening time of diabetic retinopathy was brought down from 4 hours to 10 minutes. But guess what happened? When they did that, they realized they're now creating a massive backlog of patients because there are no capacity. So, which is why it's important, there are multiple, players in this, the person who can actually work with data and massive swaths, being the technical guys, the biomedical, the clinical guys, as well as those actually that have, from a business standpoint, an understanding of not only today in automation, but future and predictive, to to be able to identify end use cases that are going to be high impact and they're going to shape the future. And like we've realized, the future no longer is away. You know, things like COVID essentially bring forward some of these transformation requirements and make them imminent needs. I've given you a few pointers. I'm not sure if your questions fully answered.
No, I think these are very, very useful pointers, and thanks for that, Prashant. I'm just trying to, go through some of the questions which our audience have written. So one interesting question is around logistics and the last minute connection. And the question is that, is there a more holistic approach, and why, and anything which we are seeing from a logistics perspective, right? So let me open this up. I mean, I can give it a first shot, and then I'll, open it up for other panelists to talk about it. So as you're right that logistics as a function is by definition a very, very data intensive operation. Everything which you are moving from point A to point B, what is getting moved, when is it getting moved, by which vehicle or means it is getting moved, whether it is reaching on time or not. There is a plethora of information, whether that information is not captured or captured in manual way, or it is captured in a system, is more a matter of detail, but the very function itself is rich with data. And not just that, some of the early algorithms in this predictive space has been in the logistics, that how do you optimize your distribution, how do you reduce your cost, how do you increase your OTIF, and all of that. So so it's a very rich area of not just the ability to capture a lot of information, but also to use that information to really optimize your internal processes. And I would say that given the fact that there are disruptions now, for example, there could be a disruption because temporary workers are not available to just handle the goods. And even though you may have trucks, but there is not enough people who can drive those trucks on the road. Or even if you have drivers and trucks, but you may have situations where it can get disrupted because of the containment zone problem. So there are too many disruptions also in both the inbound and the outbound logistics, which actually then requires a very, very near real-time decision-making ability, because it is changing very fast. So I would say that logistics, and particularly the last mile connectivity, is something which has a tremendous potential to be completely disrupted by significant use of data and advanced analytics. I'm happy if anybody else wants to kind of add to that question. Anand, Prashant, Rishi, feel free to respond to that.
I think we are fine. We are fine.
Great. There is another question which has come in, which is around strong proactive maintenance of foolproof sensors means clean ambience. Okay, so I think the question is more around continuity of applications in an organization. So I think I will probably expand the scope a little more. I think the intent of the question is that you do something, whether it's a predictive maintenance or you use some investments, but then how do you ensure that any initiative which is taken by an organization continues and there is a sustainability aspect to it. So I'll just, take a first stab at that. This is not your problem only. I think, at least from my experience, I can see that, say that there are many organizations who also face a similar problem, that you quickly do a pilot, but then after that, the interest kind of wanes or goes away, and then you are back to square one. So from my experience, I can say that what really helps organizations in sustaining it is to ensure that the start is done in a proper way. The start of an initiative is not to really use AI because it's a new toy, but to use AI because it is going to give a sustainable benefit to your business. So starting with the end in mind is the first important task. The second important task is that if you are sure and convinced that it is definitely going to add to the top line or the bottom line or address the risks of your organization, then need to set up a proper governance and process around it to ensure that at every stage you are able to evaluate and support the process going forward. And the third important aspect is that you can't do it all alone. You need an ecosystem of hardware, software, data scientists, other people around you to make it all happen. Otherwise, you will be just reinventing the wheel. So think of proactively creating that ecosystem around you. So those will be my three key things. One is begin with the end in mind. Second is have a governance and a process around it. And third is build an ecosystem. Then chances are very high that whatever you build for your organization will last. The change will stick. Any other perspective from any other panel member, please feel free to jump in. I'm just quickly, going through in the interest of time.
If I was to quickly add,
yes.
I think you're right. This pilot phenomenon, and we in the healthcare world, a friend of mine and I, we actually call it pilotitis, right? We end up conducting a lot of pilots, but alas and unfortunately, you don't really move this from a discovery phase into a development phase and eventually into a dissemination phase. Mm-hmm. And that, I agree with you, is critical. And I think what's going to be important is saying for this to have longevity to it, like I spoke about the data strategy and I spoke about incentives and I spoke about technical ability. It's about making sure that this is a medium-term strategy that organizations deploy. And let me give you an example. And once again, in some of my conversations with folks around the world, in the world of COVID, there is a lot of work, especially in countries like the United States, where it's been ballooning and it's been crazy out there, to use artificial intelligence for bed allocation to decide how many beds should be set aside for COVID patients versus for non-COVID patients. Now, it may or may not come as a surprise to you, but the big challenge in the United States, depending on what the adoption of this AI has been fundamentally driven by the incentive, for example, to avoid medical lawsuits. And depending on geography and the incentive saying, by medical lawsuits nahi chahiye, so maybe we'll actually make sure that we have a different bed allocation technique. It's not necessarily keeping in mind saying how many people are going to be afflicted by it, but about saying what's going to be. So the incentives that actually drive some of this behavior in the data strategy, in AI and ML, in the use of this, and in deploying assets and investments for technical ability to stitch all of this together is going to be, it's important that it dawns on organization. It already has, because we all have to go through this transformation of business model. So in some sense, it has been awake now. But I think there's a lot of uncharted territory and unconquered frontiers as we speak.
Perfect. Another question, which is completely from a different perspective, it is that how AI and analytics is helping enhance the employee experience in organization. So any of my panelists, would you like to take this up?
There is a lot of work happening on, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of digitization and automation internally. So a lot of resource process automations have started, robotic process automations, RPAs have started internally in companies where they don't need to do mundane stuff. They need to focus more on the high value items per se. So especially on operation side, fraud, AML, anti-money laundering, a lot of those experience exception reports have started to build up. So rather than focusing on the entire Excel and identifying each and every case in that, so exceptions have been built basis the data which comes from multiple corners, and then churning that data, you only need to look at exceptions. So quality work rather than quantity is moving more towards quality of work, I think, and people are benefiting from this, so they need to focus only on 10 or 20 items rather than looking at the full list of the laundry list of things which are there. A lot of work on that has happened.
Absolutely. And I will just add a few things. I would say that there are specific functions, like, for example, finance function. And anybody who has an experience in finance would know the kind of pressure people go through at the month end, quarter end, or year end, because they will have to reconcile the data, prepare the statutory reports, the MIS reports, and there is a huge amount of work which comes in because of the manual processes which organizations have. And by the way, these people who work, they are very, very highly qualified. They'll be chartered accountants, and there will be a dissatisfaction if you are asking somebody who is very highly qualified to do an invoice reconciliation. Clearly, an invoice reconciliation can be done easily using an intelligent bot, or at least maybe 80% of that can be done, and the rest 20% can still be done by a human being. So that is one aspect of the regular work, which also spikes in, and the effort can be kind of leveled using AI and analytics. The second area is on ability to find information about things, like, for example, what we have done internally, within PwC, is that we have created a chatbot which will be like, can answer any question about the organization. So if you just want to know what is the leave policy, you just type that question and it will give you. If you want to know what is the expense policy, it will give you, etc., etc. So you really do not have to search for answer. You don't have to go through voluminous pieces of document to get to that specific information. So that is a big help, because especially in these times when people are working from home, it's impossible for you to just tap the shoulder of your fellow colleague and ask a question. You are all by yourself. So how do you support people working from home with the same level of proficiency? And that's where an AI-enabled solution would significantly help. So I thought I'll give you a couple of these examples to add to the point. Maybe we can probably take one or two more questions. Deepak and Hari, you can advise me how much time we have.
We can address these questions during the course of the week, because I believe Rishi also has to leave for another meeting at 12:30. Sure. So probably maybe a closing comment from your end would be nice.
Wonderful. So I think it has been an absolute pleasure speaking on this very, very interesting topic, which is also close to my heart. And I think we spoke on a wide variety of subjects. We started off with what are the uses and applications of AI in different sectors. We talked about retail, B2C, banking, healthcare, gaming, so a wide diversity, and practitioners from those sectors gave their experience and perspective of where AI can help. Then we very quickly moved into some of the concerns from a data privacy perspective, data confidentiality perspective, touched upon that. Then we also talked a lot about what is holding us back. What is it that we need to do more to enable the adoption of some of these technologies which have a wide-ranging impact on us. And finally, we touched upon a few things around experience and around the fact that how is AI going to help people or help organizations during times of these crises. So overall, I would say a wonderful, very, very content-rich conversation in the last 1.5 hours. I think the 90 minutes have just flown by. I have not realized that we have been chatting for 90 minutes, to be honest, Deepak. So with that, thank you very much for patiently listening, also asking very intelligent, insightful questions. And I hope you got a few things on this Saturday morning.
No, I think it was an awesome conversation. I've never enjoyed a technology conversation the way I did this today. I think it was extremely insightful. So Deepta, thank you very much for bringing the best out of everybody. So, and the CEO Lounge, which I keep talking about, is just not about transmission and knowledge. It is also about knowing the people a little better. And probably I could start with Rishi, because I know he has a hard stop and he has to leave. So Rishi, what's cooking during the lockdown? I know you're a great chef as well. So is there something that's interesting happened during this period?
No, I'm not a great chef, but I tried to do a lot of things from BJP also. BJP is Bartan Jharu Pocha, helping everybody at home and doing my bit on Sunday evening, try out some new dishes. That's all in terms of playing. Actually, it's a big time to spend, big opportunity to spend time with family, with kids. Especially my one son is in US, so he was back just before the pandemic travel ban came in. So able to spend time with him, spend time with family. playing a lot of games, doing my bit of yoga also. And now for the last 1.5 months, been going to office. We started office around middle of May. So 4 times office and enjoy my work from home as well. So it's been a lot of change in terms of mindset of working from home, especially because in financial services, we can never imagine to work from home. And in fact, we close all our accounts, everything, regulatory reportings. It just works so well. Everybody is doing their bit, and productivity in the company has also gone up. So it's been a good time. Business is also good. So that's the icing on the cake. So.
No, interesting. I think the work from home is here to stay because I just got a news report that the Uber has shut all their offices in Bombay. So yeah, so I think the trend's kicking off. Anand, your life has been pretty inspirational. I think you are a born entrepreneur, if I may say so. 16 years, first company, and then a successful exit from Burb, and you know, they're building up something very, very interesting with this. And I also believe in between you started selling door-to-door models, you know. And so what has really been, what kept you moving? What is it, who's been your mentor? What really inspired you all these years to do what you actually been doing?
You know, my mom has been my mentor. At a very early age, I lost my dad. And, you know, then I saw her, you know, making the ends meet for the family. She, you know, overnight from being like a housewife, she became an entrepreneur, you know, through, you know, we used to run a home boutique, like, you know, help stitch clothes, do all sorts of odd jobs to kind of educate us, to get us educated and all that, right? So, you know, what I learned very early on in my life was that you got to keep going. You cannot stop and rest. You got to enjoy, you know, things as they come to you, right? But you can't, like, you know, it's a ladder, right? Not a bed, right? So at any stage of life, there's always more to do, and you have to find a cause that motivates you. You have to find something that, you know, you get excited about, and you don't think of it as a Monday or a Saturday or whatever, right? It's like, you know, all you're having a lot of fun. So the mantra that I, you know, that keeps me going is have a lot of fun. I go for treks. Well, unfortunately, this year I've not been able to just because of the lockdown, you know, since March, and before that I was traveling. But last year we did a lot of treks. I go trek in the Sayadris, I trek in the Himalayas. And, you know, that's the weekend getaway, right? For me. But, you know, you got to keep going. You got to not stop, right? Like there's something or the other. The world is evolving. The world is changing. And if you, you know, if you stop, you are decaying actually. So that's been my mantra.
Well, I believe you're also quite fluent in one of the very interesting language, which is in top of the town, which is Mandarin. And is there a conversation that you heard with the two Chinese, which they were talking about, thinking that you don't know the language? Is it something, an interesting incident that has happened with you?
Yeah, so I used to, like, no, not anymore. I you know, I had a private tutor when I used to live in Seattle to teach me Mandarin, and I did not know that I would end up in China. You know, I've been there for like 8 months back in 2006 when I used to still work for Motorola. But, you know, we got lost on the Great Wall. So, you know, it was like the evening, you know, evening hours, the sunset. This was February, and you know, Beijing gets pretty chilly around that time of the year. And me and a colleague from Seattle, like, you know, we were just, you know, we went into a very small kind of cafe up in the Great Wall, you know, coming down, and then we were having good coffee, warm coffee, you know, and conversation about, you know, India, because I'd moved back to India for 6 months, and he was still in Seattle. We were comparing notes, like, you know, of what India promised and, you know, what India delivered to Anand when I'd moved back. And you know, by the time we realized it was 7 o'clock, and we kind of went down to the bus stop. And there was no one inside, none of the tourist buses. There's absolutely no human inside. And Beijing and Great Wall, if you know, that is like 2.5 hours away from Beijing. And China in 2006, like, you know, I believe even now, you know, people don't speak English, and not in that remote part of China. So I used my Mandarin skills to convince a taxi driver to, you know, at least show us where the bus stop is. No amount of money would budge the guy to leave his home and drop us off 2.5 hours away. But at least he pointed me to the bus stop. And the story gets interesting because we go to the bus stop, and you know, I can barely read the numbers, right? So the number says it's 8 o'clock. The bus is the last bus is at 8, and it's 8:10. So David, you know, who was from Seattle, my colleague from Motorola, I told David, hey, if it's like the US, the bus is already left, but there might be good news. Like, you know, if this is East and like India, the bus is yet to arrive. So, you know, why don't we stay here for a few more minutes, figure out? And 8:15, the bus showed up. We could see two lights, from from a distance. The bus showed up. We had no idea what the bus, where it said, but it was warm inside, so we hopped on and we got tickets. And literally 2 hours later, I spotted a Walmart, and then I spotted an IKEA. And I said, I've been to this IKEA because one of my colleagues, just to impress me, took me to an IKEA, saying that, hey, we have IKEA here. So that's, on the way back from the Great Wall. So that was, a very, sorry, long story, but it was a Mandarin.
No, Anand, you should write a book someday. I think that should be a very interesting one. Yeah. Hey, Prashant, and I know quite a few insights of yours, but you faced some serious health issues, and then came up to build up a very solid company in MediBuddy and so on. So, are you married to the healthcare, or is there something which is we're going to see beyond the healthcare in your life that you're going to do?
No, I have to be candid. As I stand right now, I see myself as married to healthcare. And the reason I say it is, and you're right, you pointed out about the health episode that I had. This was way back in 2010. And this was and there are no doctors on the panel, but this was pulmonary encephalopathy, where, I had basically a jaundice that went awry. And I was, according to the ICU, and I was in the ICU for a week. And the doctor basically said to my family, to my wife, saying, "Agar aaj ki raat nikal gayi, to bach gaya." And if he actually survives the night, then he's fine. And my wife was like saying, "Are you crazy? He's got a 1.5, a 2-year-old daughter, a 9-month-old son, and what's wrong with you?" And he's only like 30. But this is the proverbial. And I saw the light, and I came back. And I'm actually not even, it's not as if I've been born into a healthcare family of sorts. I actually am. My family's been in the diamond trade. We've been selling polished diamonds for a living. So I'm actually the bad egg in the family who decided to do other things way back in 2006 itself. And you keep thinking about this, saying there must be a reason why you're not there and you're still here. Saying, koi to hoga karan, koi to wajah hogi. And, and as the more I think,
this panel today, that was the reason.
Absolutely. There you go. See, serendipity has played a significant role in my life. So I wouldn't be surprised about that one bit at all. But, at the end of the day, you think about life, saying there's a reason why you're still around. And I remember an episode. It's not going to be as exciting a story as Anand's. But nevertheless, I was in the Mumbai locals in the 2007 or 8. I just joined healthcare, the BlackBerry days, and I was sitting, and thankfully I got a seat because it was late in the night. A gentleman sitting on my right, and he peeped into, and he was looking at my BlackBerry, and he saw healthcare or medical or whatnot, and he said, "Beta, tum healthcare mein ho?" So I said, "Haan ji, main healthcare mein hu." And then I went back to doing my stuff, but that's not where the conversation ended. He said, it's a tad bit emotional. He basically says, "Beta, aisa kuch karna ki." So what basically happened was, his wife was a dialysis patient, right? And as you know, for dialysis, end-stage renal disease, you got to do dialysis 3 times a week, 4 hours every session. So he comes and tells me saying, "Beta, tum healthcare mein ho, kuch aisa karna, ye dialysis की वजह से बहुत परेशानी होती है, बहुत पैसे लगते हैं, financial duress हो जाता है family को. तो ऐसा कुछ करना कि हम जैसे लोगों की कुछ मदद कर सको." So at that stayed with me forever, right? And once again, so I basically said, so to your question, healthcare is for life for these 2 very important things that happened in my life.
Yeah, though you're not married into a healthcare family, but you're married to a healthcare wife. So I think you missed out to mention that, Prashant.
That's right.
A gold medalist from IIM and IIT, and now I believe you're also visiting faculty in both those colleges. Is there an emotional moment, studying and passing out and then going back and teaching in the same college? Is there an emotional feel that you get out of this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I can share my experience of having done it for the first time. So I was called to take a session, and as I stood on the lectern, it was a very, very emotional moment, because my first words were that I was at your stage just a few years back, and now I'm on the other side of the table. It feels fantastic to be here within these 4 portals of this institute, and with the 4 walls, to be saying something which all of you would listen. So it was a very, very emotional moment, and a very special moment for me. And then I said that, by the way, I'm also a little scared, because I do not know what kind of difficult questions you'll ask me, because I used to do the same for a visiting fac when I was there in the institute. So please don't ask me very difficult questions. And and we started off in a bit of a light note, and it went absolutely fantastic. So it was a great moment, and a very special occasion for me personally.
And are there any interests beyond the academics that go for you?
Yeah, so I do a dabble in a bit of writing. So what happened was that I actually love visiting places. It's probably I have inherited it from my parents, who also love to travel a lot. So one fine day, I think what happened in a conversation, somebody was mentioning about a particular location, and I said I could not recall that. And then my wife said, "Oh, by the way, you don't even recall where you have gone. Why do you even go?" So then that kind of struck me. I said, "Oh, how is it possible that I can't even recall?" Then I said, "Why don't I write down where I go?" And that's how I started this habit of chronicling some of my stories and put it in a nice way and all that. So I think that has become now more of a passion for me to keep writing, and just for nothing else but for me to just reminisce those days and moments which I spend during the holidays with my family and friends. So I think I've just picked that up in the last 4 or 5 years. Although my daughter says that I need to improve on my English, so I take her feedback every time I write an article and I show it to her, and I'll ask her that, "What's the rating you give me?" And she will very grudgingly say it's 4.2 out of 5. I say, "Fantastic." So
You can
I'm
show her.
more than
You can show her
80%
your
confident.
medals, Sudeep. So you can do that. Well, gentlemen, I think it was an awesome conversation, and I personally feel AI is something which is the best invented thing by a human being. There are probably endless advantages, but there could be some disadvantages too. Probably the cost, maintenance. I don't know. We'll see it to it, and thanks to the audience for being so knowledgeable and asking some great questions. So we'll answer whatever the questions that are left out during the course of the week. And I'll see you all next weekend, 11 o'clock, on a new set of topic, a new set of leaders. And until then, take good care of yourselves, stay healthy, stay safe. Namaskar. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.